Hello, I'm Oliver Colling, and this is my 70's TV childhood. Hello, and welcome back to my 70's TV childhood. We are a podcast which celebrates what it was like to grow up as a child in the UK during the 1970s, and the important part that television played in our and our families' lives. Every fortnight, we look back to that special time in life for those of us who were children in the 70s. And then every other week, we also bring you the My 70s TV Childhood Quiz, which offers you 20 challenging questions based on 1970s UK television. I have got some exciting news to share in relation to our almost legendary quiz. We've been working hard behind the scenes here at My 70s TV Childhood Towers, and the finest minds in podcast land have been engaged on a quest to bring you a version of our popular theme tune quiz that you can play at home with family and friends. Now, we're currently in our pre-production phase, so we're starting to get ready to manufacture the game. But as we get to that point, we'd really appreciate it if you could help us by letting us know whether this is something you might be interested in buying. There's no commitment at this point, but so we can get production numbers right, we would be grateful if you could go to our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com and let us know whether you'd be interested in the game. I should say that any purchase of the game will help towards the cost of producing the podcast, so that would be much appreciated. Thanks for all of you who have expressed an interest so far, and thank you for all your positive comments about this. Finally, a chance to show your family and friends what fabulous knowledge of classic TV theme tunes you've got. I've said this before, but one of the things we love about producing this podcast is the amount of engagement you have with us. So when we recently celebrated our 200th episode, it was really quite moving how many of you got in touch to say how much you enjoyed listening. And that sort of message makes all the difference. If you do want to get in touch with us, you can do so in a number of different ways. You can leave a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or on one of our many social media sites on Facebook, Instagram, X and LinkedIn, or by emailing Oliver at my70stvchildhood.com. You might also be interested in joining our Facebook members group, where you can share your memories and thoughts with other like-minded people fondly looking back on the 1970s and its television. This week has seen the safe return of the Artemis II space expedition to the far side of the moon. And if it hasn't for any chance, given this podcast is pre-recorded, I would have come back and edited this episode anyway. It's been an amazingly powerful subject for the news media and has genuinely got people across the world excited about space again. If all goes to plan, we should see humans back on the moon in the next couple of years and then on to Mars over the next decade or two. So with that excitement about going to the moon, combined with international unrest, economic decline, and possibly all shortages, we're really getting back into some serious 1970s nostalgia at the moment. Regular listeners will know that one subject we've come back to many times over our 200 plus episodes is space. And by that I mean space travel, and what a big thing space in general was for us 70s kids. Now, I was born in 1967, so I don't remember the original moon landings, but I do remember all the excitement around the Apollo program. And I do remember the last moon landings in December 1972, and the feeling of awe when I was walking home from school in the darkness and able to look up to the moon and imagine the brave astronauts actually being there as I was looking up. Space was there for humans to explore. Being on the moon was just the beginning of a lifetime of exciting space travel achievements for the human race. But then, it wasn't. Over 50 years later, we're still waiting for that next moon landing. We've had a few false starts with the ultimately doomed space shuttle program, and we do have a permanent International Space Station in orbit. But by now, to quote Captain James T. Kirk, we should have been out there to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Or as we should probably say now, no one has gone before. But we haven't done. And that's a big disappointment, particularly when I look back at my Brooke Bond T-card album, The Race into Space, which I have here. And those who are watching on YouTube can actually see it. The rest of you will have to imagine. And that promised a whole lot more. I mentioned these tea cards before on the podcast. My Auntie Elsie, well, technically my great auntie, but you know how these things work, used to collect the tea cards for me and my sister, and she would complete the albums for us, somehow managing to fill 2 books of each collection, so my sister and I would both have one. As they normally had about 50 cards in there, that must have been a heck of a lot of tea for Auntie Elsie to drink. Although I now see, looking back, that she must have got her friends and neighbours involved, as it takes a hell of a lot of cups of tea to get 100 cards in the albums. Anyway, one of the favourite collections Auntie Elsie gave me was the aforementioned Race into Space collection, which was published in 1971, with a foreword by a very youthful-looking Patrick Moore, which I'll read to you. I put my glasses on. We are living in the space age. Science fiction has become science fact, and great advances are being made every year. The moon has been reached. Our rockets have been sent out to the planets Venus and Mars, and within the next decade or 2 we should be able to receive television pictures from the very boundaries of the solar system. Space research has been part of our everyday lives, and we can watch its progress. By now there can be few people who've not seen star-like points crawling across the sky, the artificial satellites circling the world and sending back their information. And it is more than likely that some of those who are starting to collect this series of cards will actually go to the moon, perhaps even beyond. It is a staggering thought, but it is by no means unlikely. I commend this set of cards to you. It is factual, comprehensive and well produced. If you collect the whole series, you will learn much from the pictures and text. After all, we have entered a new age. Earthly isolationism ended at that moment on July the 21st, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin stepped out onto the Sea of Tranquility. Signed, Patrick Moore. That's really strange to just read that, and really quite moving in a way. And it probably explains why I seriously thought I'd be an astronaut until about the age of 6, when I then decided that I'd rather be a cowboy. Neither of which are actually that realistic career choice for a child growing up in Warrington, but Patrick was confident that some of us collecting the cards would go to the moon. Well, still some time, I suppose. But what that does do is demonstrate the confidence and positivity that the moon landings generated across the planet. But sadly, that confidence was to quickly dry up, and our dreams of space travel withered away during the rest of the decade. A few other things in the album worth mentioning. Some of the plans mentioned did happen, like the Viking missions to Mars, but others, like a regular reusable lunar shuttle to ferry supplies and astronauts backwards and forwards to a planned giant moon base, are sadly still dreams. The final card in the collection, number 50, that is a lot of tea to drink to get 50 cards, is one of my favourites, as it outlines in great detail what the manned flight to Mars, that's their caption, not mine, would be like. And this is what it says. America's plan for a manned expedition to Mars involves 2 nuclear-powered spaceships, each carrying 6 astronauts, launched on November the 12th, 1981. Reaching Mars on August 9th, 1982, each vehicle would orbit the planet for 80 days, while unmanned probes, followed by 3 men from each ship, would descend to carry out scientific research and collect samples. During the return to Earth, landing on August the 14th, 1983, the expedition would fly past Venus to observe the planet and use its gravity to reduce speed. That's such an exciting vision, contained on the back of a small tea card. But what gets me most is the absolute precision of the dates. The mission would reach March on 9th of August 1982 and return to Earth on the 14th of August 1983. That sounded like an awfully long time away in 1971, but it seems even further away looking back at what is now over 40 years past the planned landing date. And so, the dreams of space died, but it's great to see them revived, and, touch wood, I will get to see another moon landing soon. But back in the 70s, we couldn't contemplate the possibility that the space age wouldn't last, and space was everywhere in popular culture, not least on our televisions. And one of my earliest memories of a space-related TV show is also one of the nicest.
This is the planet Earth, our planet. It is a small planet wrapped in clouds, but for us it is a very important place. It is home. But supposing we look away from the Earth and travel in our imaginations across the vast starry stretches of outer space. Then we can imagine other stars. Stranger stars by far than ever shone in our night sky. And planets too. This calm, serene orb, sailing majestically among the myriad stars of the firmament. Perhaps this star too is home for somebody. Can we imagine the sort of people that might live on a star like this? Let us go very close. Let us look and listen very carefully. And perhaps we shall see and hear. That is a clanger. And that is another clanger. They seem to have a piece of rope. And now they seem to be having a bit of an argument about their piece of rope. Quite right, too. That's no way for clangers to behave.
What can I say about the clangers? The tiny, knitted creatures were absolutely charming, and despite the fact they communicated by whistling, you could mostly understand what they were saying. I'm not quite sure how they managed to do that. The great Oliver Postgate and Peter Firmin tapped into the 60s interest in space and offered a more gentle angle on the possibilities of extraterrestrial life than some of the more, how should we say, downbeat films and TV shows of the period. But they weren't the first to spend lots of time in space. No, in 1962, Gerry and Sylvia Anderson had brought their own contribution to the space race in a show which was repeated many times and was still going strong in the 1970s.
I wish I was a spaceman, the fastest guy alive. I'd fly you round the universe in Fireball XL5. Way out in space together, conquerors of the sky. My heart would be a fireball, a fireball. Every time I gazed into your starry eyes.
Fireball XL5 was an early example of the Andersons taking on space and followed the adventures of Captain Steve Zodiac of the World Space Patrol, who flew around the galaxy having great adventures in the year 2062. Doesn't seem that far away now. It was clean, wholesome fun and had the feeling of a sort of American Western set in space. It's probably no coincidence that this was the Andersons' most successful show to appear on US TV and the only one to be shown on a major network, NBC. But the show which firmly hooked into the spirit of the space race and the moon landings, with a touch of Cold War politics included as well, is one of my earliest TV memories.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Star Trek is one of the first TV shows I remember watching, and the first episode I saw scared me rigid. It was one of those episodes that featured some bald telepathic aliens whose Skulls moved in and out when they sent their subconscious messages, and it gave me nightmares. I couldn't have been older than 4 or 5, so no wonder, I suppose. I probably shouldn't really have been watching it. I later learned they were a race called the Telosians, apparently. Now, I do have to be very careful when referring to some great sci-fi shows, as I know some listeners are very protective of them. But I did love Star Trek, without getting overly nerdy about it. William Shatner was perfect as Captain Kirk, the brave, all-American hero with a streak of cynicism and a slight rebelliousness, which was balanced against the cool, logical reserve of Mr. Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, and the rough, direct approach of DeForest Kelley as Dr. McCoy. What I loved about it, as well as the great acting, were the adventures the crew got up to, which really captured my imagination, and I particularly liked the futuristic gadgets like the communicators they used, the endless rows of flashing lights on the instrument consoles of the bridge, obviously the transporters, which we all wanted to use, and I really loved the idea of doors which open for you with a swishing noise. Star Trek was the right show at the right time for the space race, and even though its original run was reasonably short, it did enter the popular imagination to the effect that NASA named its first prototype space shuttle Enterprise, and Motorola famously based their flip phone on the Star Trek communicator. So life does imitate art sometimes. One interesting spin-off from the show was the animated version, which came out in 1973 after the original show had been cancelled in 1969. The show wasn't the only animated version of a TV show, but unlike many of them, it used the original actors from the television show to voice the animated characters, so was pretty good in my memory, although the production budget was clearly not enormous, as the series used to use similar scenes and musical accompaniments again and again and again. So Star Trek kept the positive view of space exploration going, and following the animated series, we ended the 70s with the first Star Trek movie, which led into more movies, and then any number of Star Trek related spin-off series, which continue to this day. I think that Star Trek deserves a future episode of this podcast to itself. What do you think? Let me know. British television didn't miss on space-related TV shows either. Doctor Who had some of its most memorable days in the 1970s, with John Pertwee and Tom Baker taking the lead. And we had our own copies of big-budget US space-related shows, which were often well-written, but lacked the same budget as their US cousins. So despite shows like Blake 7 holding a special place in many viewers' hearts, not even the biggest fans of the show would argue that the special effects were anything to write home about. In fact, they were reasonably amateur. Another way in which space grabbed our childish attention was through the news, which provided excellent coverage for events like the moon landings and later on things like the Apollo-Soyuz mission in 1975, where American and Soviet space capsules docked in orbit and thawed Cold War relations for a short time, with the handshake in space between the astronauts and the cosmonauts. And for us kids, John Craven's Newsround provided lots of detailed coverage with their dedicated space correspondent, Reg Turnill. Like in this clip from 1975, where Newsround picks up on the Mariner space probe's progress.
But now on BBC One, John Craven's Newsround.
Revealed at last the secrets of the planet Mercury. Hello again. The most spectacular pictures yet of the surface of Mercury. We've just started receiving photographs taken last night by America's Mariner 10 spacecraft at just 130 miles above the planet's surface. And Reg Turnill, the BBC's space correspondent, has been taking a look at them.
No one dreamed that man's first attempt to look at this hot and mysterious planet, 1/3 the size of Earth and so near the sun it's much too bright for telescopes, would be so incredibly successful. But Mariner 10's tiny aerial, that little dish at the bottom, 4.5 feet wide, is at this moment sending back the last of 4,000 TV pictures. A few hours ago, this took 9 minutes to travel 97 million miles to Canberra in Australia. Those craters are about 30 miles wide. The dots in the middle of the craters are mountain peaks. American scientists now have pictures of practically the whole surface, and that's even more battered than the moon.
What I like about that is that it treated the children watching as sensible viewers, wanting to be informed and learn more, instead of dumbing everything down as it was for kids. I do think we have lost something of this today. As the decade wore on, the mood around space travel became more muted as it gradually became clear we weren't going to the moon again anytime soon, let alone flying humans to Mars. And some parts of popular culture became more cynical. I remember seeing the film Capricorn 1, which suggested that the moon landings had been faked as part of a sinister government plot, in a thinly disguised attempt to promote the widespread conspiracy theory that the whole thing with the moon landings had been a hoax. And on television, the Andersons returned with a new, live-action, space-themed show. In Space 1999, we had at least reached the moon and set up Moonbase Alpha, but by our own foolishness in using the moon to dump nuclear waste, we managed to cause an explosion, which sent the moon hurtling into outer space. Don't get me wrong, I loved Space 1999, but optimistic it wasn't. And most of the adventures that Commander Koenig and his crew had involved several moon-based residents meeting a grisly end. So as the decade ended, so did our love affair with space. Instead of the optimism and excitement of the moon landings, we had the more limited ambition of the space shuttle, which was then dashed by future tragedy. But in spite of it all, I still have that excitement about space travel, and the prospect that we are back on track and going to the moon and then, if we're all lucky, to Mars. Brooke Bond thought we'd be there by 1982, but if we do get there while I'm still alive, I will be very, very happy. Oh, and we haven't even touched on all those TV dramas involving alien life out there. Well, I'm pretty certain that alien life does exist. And despite this sounding a bit threatening, I'm also pretty sure that someone, somewhere, is watching us.
On your last trip, did you discover what the Earth people eat? They eat a great many of these. They peel them with their metal knives. Boil them for 20 of their minutes. Then they smash them all to bits. They are clearly a most primitive people. For mash, get smash.
Were you excited about space during your 70s TV childhood? Are you excited about what's happening now? Do let us know by getting in touch via one of the ways I mentioned earlier. And if you missed that, details are in the accompanying show notes. We'll be back next week with our next quiz. And don't forget to visit our blog and let us know if you might be interested in our new game. That's at www.my70stvchildhood.com. We'll be back in a fortnight with our next regular podcast. So in the meantime, look after yourselves and the ones you love, and join me again soon for more from My 70s TV Childhood.